Hello and welcome. I'm Colin Daniel from riffninja.com, and this is lesson number 2 in a series of 3 lessons on the subject of open G major and what can be done with it. In the first lesson, we discovered what could be done with it a little bit and take a look at how it's tuned. And now we're going to use the open tuning and apply it to the 3 primary chords that we learned in lesson number 1. And we're going to go a step further. This is 1, 4, and 5. That's an important group of chords that you need to know. And we're going to do it fretted and also with the slide. I prefer using my open tunings for sliding rather than fretting, but that's a personal preference because a lot of players do either or both, right? It just depends on the mood. Okay, so what's this 1, 4, 5 stuff about? Well, it's the notes in the scale. The first note is the tonic or the root note. The fourth and the fifth are how they appear in the scale in order. So if you're in the key of G major, then your first note or your first letter name for G major is G, right? That's the obvious one. The 4 and 5 will be C and D. You know, you count the letter name you start and end with. G, A, B, C. There's the fourth. That's where it'll show up in the scale, right? So G, C, and D, 1, 4, and 5. That's what it represents. It's a very popular way of communicating music through the numeral system. It works very well. It's used exclusively in Nashville and used in many bands and on many stages as a quick communication. So getting to learn your 1, 4, 5 will make you a much more happening player. And we're going to use it today in more than one way. As I was mentioning before, I said to you, well, look, here's a G major tuning, and I'm shying away from the low D because it's not the root. And I mentioned that before, right? So G is the root. And that's a G major chord right there. If this is G, then 2 frets higher is A, 2 more frets higher is B, a fret higher is C because B to C is a natural semitone. That's a C chord. And then all we have to do is go 2 frets higher and we got the D, which is the 5. So 1, 4, and 5, and we also have 12 fret octave. And so there's many, many, many different variations of chord progressions in using 1, 4, 5, and I'll get to one in just a second. And I just mentioned also here's your slide. And I particularly love the 12th fret tuned in G because it has some nice string combination possibilities that are optioned for us later in lesson number 3. And I'm just pointing it out now. So you might want to check that out. 12th fret, open G, open upper octave G, right? I love that sound. Sounds good. Okay. I like to do it with some raunch too, with some distortion. Learn to play your slide with some distortion. That's where this first finger that I was talking about earlier that I used for damping really comes in handy. G, C, D. So there's an example of a 1, 4, 5, kind of a 12-bar thing without going too deep into it and getting really complicated. 4 bars of the G, you know, 2 bars of the C, back to 2 bars of the G. 1 bar D, 1 bar C, 2 bars G, and we're done, just like that, eh? And of course, I mentioned that you could also fret this, right? So I'll just put the slide down for a second and we'll fret it, right? Like I said, I like to combine my fretted stuff with the chords and the slide. That's, again, a personal preference. Check out a guy named Sonny Landreth. He plays and uses all his fingers behind the slide to fret notes as he's using the slide on his pinky. Or then sometimes I've seen him use it on his third finger too. 1, 2, 3, but I think most of the time he's using his pinky. Neither way is wrong, okay? So now I mentioned earlier that I had this low D that I was avoiding, the 6th string. Well, here's a way to use it. I mean, there's a lot of ways to use it. There's no way I'm going to cover them all, but here's an example. I like it as an inverted root. So for example, if this is G, this is D, that's the 5th, 1 and 5, right? But G is your root on the 5th string, right? So you play your root, and then you play your 5th, and then you play your root again. Really good practice. Then you move to the C. Start with the 5th string because that's your root, right? And you always want to start with the root. Then you're back to the G, right? To the D. If C is here, D is here, start with your 5th string, which is where the root is. To the C, back to the G. There you go. How's that for cool? Using alternate bass drum. Now you can go really fast and you get really complicated with I've added more strum there. I'm going down, down, up, down, down, up. Down, down, up. So bass note, then down, up, right? And then alternate bass notes at the same time. Hey, you know what? If you like this lesson and you want to learn even more and you're really hungry, you should check out my slide course at riffninja.com. All right, thanks for your time. Over and out.